Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our program, Senior Moments, Event Planning for the Mature Audience. I'm Jamie Machik with the Nicolet Federated Library System in Green Bay. It's a lovely day here. I hope all of you have some lovely weather in your neck of the woods as well. We have Mallory Arents with us today, and I met Mallory at the Computers and Libraries Conference in DC back in April, I believe it was. And it was kind of funny because we were both tweeting about some sessions that we were both in and retweeting and favoriting each other's tweets. And finally I said, I'm like, who are you and where are you? And we ended up meeting up at the conference, and I attended one of her sessions. That wasn't on this topic, but I really enjoyed her presentation style and her energy. And she mentioned that she speaks about programming for seniors. And she was telling me before we started how they do over 400 adult programs a year, which is crazy since there aren't even 400 days in a year, but she'll probably tell you a little bit more about that. So enough of me. Mallory, whenever you're ready, go right ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Jamie. And hi, everyone. Welcome to Senior Moments, Event Planning for the Mature Audience. As Jamie mentioned, my name is Mallory Arents, and I'm absolutely thrilled that it's not just Jamie and I sitting in this room. So thank you all for carving out some time in your day to be with us. I realize that there is nothing more precious than our time as well as our institution time. So thank you, and I'm going to try to do my best to make it worth your while. Alrighty, so what are we doing today? There's a couple different things. We're going to start with a brief introduction of myself so you know who's speaking to you, as well as an introduction of the community I work in. The meat of our program consists of the next few bullet points you see on your screen right now. Basically, why we should program for seniors, how to develop a program, marketing and outreach, so how to get people actually into these fabulous programs you're developing, and then assessment. We're going to wrap up with always the best part of any professional learning opportunity, and that's the takeaways. Good ideas that you can immediately take and start implementing in your own library. Our time together is going to end with about 15 minutes for questions. Keep them coming in the chat box. Jamie and I will take care of those at the end of our session. So hi, again. My name is Mallory Arents, and my role at Darien Library is the head of adult programming. As Jamie mentioned, I manage about 450 programs annually at the library, including all of the marketing and outreach involved. I've been at Darien for about 2 years now, and I mean it when I say that I have the absolute best job in the entire building. I get to do all the fun stuff. I'm really lucky to work with a director as well as a slew of colleagues who encourage and allow me to do the wacky things, to try what's new and just see what happens. Our department at Darien Library, so that's adult programming, consists of myself, another 2 full-time employees, and 2 part-time employees. So welcome to Darien, Connecticut. I believe that most of you are in Wisconsin, so we're going to take a trip on the East Coast really quickly, just so everyone understands where I work and the community that I serve. Darien, Connecticut is a residential community. It's about 40 miles outside of New York City. We're a town of about 20,000, so relatively small, and we have a large population of commuters. Very, very few office buildings. So it's what's called a bedroom town. So a lot of homes there, not a lot of industry in the town itself. Our community is civically minded, affluent, and incredibly erudite. Anecdotally, I can tell you that Darien is aging. We're seeing more and more seniors who raised their families, did their long commute into the city, and they now want to age in the town they love. Okay, so that leads me to the why. No matter your role at your library, whether that be collection development, administration, cataloging, or you're in adult programming like myself, you probably care about reaching a wide swath of patrons. So much of what I see in libraries is about getting the entire community engaged. And this is great. It's perfect to have a community center where you see children, where you see seniors, where you see people of different races and religion interacting with one space and engaging with one another. The problem lies is that we often miss out on targeted programming. So creating a series of programs that are meant for one group of people and really actively engage that group. So more of the why. This right here is a chart from the Census Bureau, 2012, and it's talking about the trends that we're seeing in the United States as regards to aging. As you can see, in 2012, there was about 43 million people in the U.S. over the age of 65. By 2050, the census expects this number to double. So we're going to be at about 80 million by 2050. This anecdotal trend that I mentioned in Darien, where we're seeing people aging, it's happening nationwide. Now the chart below talks about the percent of total population. So in 2012, we are at about 14% of the total population was 65 or older. By 2050, it's going to be even greater than that at about 21%. Digging in a little deeper with those numbers, so what does that mean, right? We know that people are getting older, but how does that really affect how we program and why we should? 25% of adults aged 65 years or older have some type of mental health problem. This is a mental health problem that is separate from normal aging. So it could be depression, it could be bipolar disorder, something that is separate from actually just those aches and pains we all get when we age. In addition, 12% of adults aged 65 or older report that they rarely or never receive the social and emotional support they needed. So what does this mean? The CDC reports that both of these things are indicators of increased stress and sadness and decrease in healthy eating and engaging in physical activity. So basically, as we get older, we have less support in social and emotional worlds, and then we're often getting depressed, and this affects our entire well-being. So we're becoming less healthy. The CDC also reports, and I love this quote, that interventions that increase social support may be effective in reducing symptoms of frequent mental distress in older adults. If you're looking for a reason to start programming at your library for seniors, just take this quote right there. I think that really perfectly sums up why we at Darien Library are targeting seniors. I think like all of our services, they're meant to enrich the community, at least I would hope so, and if we can even just a little bit provide that social and emotional support that seniors are often missing, I think we can do a pretty good job. Okay, so I'm going to decide that I've convinced you. You're ready, you're hyped to start planning and executing programs for older adults. But where to go from here? All right, step one, realize that you're not starting from nothing. Unless you live in some post-apocalyptic Hunger Games style world, chances are there are already some services geared towards seniors in your town. Like a good librarian, I'm going to ask you to do your research, see what these services are, and then meet with the other stakeholders. Chances are your town hall has a human services department, maybe a YMCA, perhaps a senior center, maybe a few book groups that perhaps your library already serves. The great thing about these organizations is it means you're not alone. Meet with these folks, see what exists already in your town, and look to fill the gaps. So at Darien Library, when I started about 2 years ago, I did just this. I met with the town stakeholders. I joined as many organizations as they would let me just to see what the conversation looked like and how the library could help. So what did I find? The town of Darien expressed a need in helping seniors stay in their homes. As I mentioned earlier, the residents of Darien, they're aging. So they raised their family and they probably no longer need those 4-bedroom homes. Darien doesn't have a lot of subsidized housing. It doesn't have smaller apartments for those looking to downsize. So we needed to think of better ways to kind of keep people healthy and active in the town of Darien. There's also a local nonprofit in Darien called At Home, and it coordinates rides for seniors to medical appointments and community events. The senior center in town has an array of healthy aging programs, and the local YMCA offers discounted classes for seniors. Ultimately, we're all trying to work together to make Darien a great place to age. I always say that we're on the same team, we're fighting for the same cause. I know that I've heard of some libraries that have difficulty partnering with outside organizations, but I think when you frame it in a sense of we're all going for the same thing, that can be really helpful. All right, step 2, have your community do the real work for you. We all know about Board of Trustees. Maybe your library has a teen advisory board, perhaps a kids advisory board. So why not start one for seniors? Around the time I came on board at Darien, we developed a senior advisory board. Our board consists of library power users. They were hand-selected by staff as being opinionated, active, and super-duper advocates for our institution. They already loved the library. We didn't need to convince them otherwise. I mean it when I say that one of my favorite parts of my job is meeting with this group once a month. I mentioned that they're opinionated, and I think that's putting it lightly. The members of our senior advisory board, they tell me when they don't like something. They tell me when something doesn't work for them. They tell me when the font is too small. We're always trying to get that type of input into our programs, into our services, into our collections, and creating a space for patrons to share what they're concerned about. There's nothing more powerful than that. So what did we learn? We created this board, and what they told me is that they saw a need in the community for more hands-on workshops that encourage socialization and interaction among participants. They mentioned that there is enough healthy aging programs throughout the town. That need was being met, and it was not in our best interest to replicate an already accessible series of events. If you go to our community association or the senior center, chances are you'll see programs on dealing with stress, on headache management, on Medicare, and on how to get the best out of those services. And there really is no need for us at the library to replicate these things that already exist. Instead, through our senior advisory board, what they pointed out was what they really wanted is to meet people, to talk to people, and to do something with their hands and participate in academic-style lectures. They're hungry for that information, they're engaged, they're curious, and it's really not a better group of people to work with. Okay. So with that, Senior Moments was born. I wish I could take credit for the name, but it really was the Senior Advisory Board. We knew we wanted to develop a series of programs, and it was our board that decided on the name Senior Moments, which I just love. It cracks me up. I'll talk about this later in the presentation, but they really are great at naming things when often that's not my strength, so I'm so happy to have them take that on. So what happens at Senior Moments? We're a monthly coffee and conversation program for seniors in the community. So in addition to an event, whether that be a hands-on workshop or a lecture, the library provides coffee and little treats. What's really great about the events is after the lecture or the workshop happens, you see people gravitate towards the coffee and stay and mingle, and sometimes they'll be there for an hour. After I close the room, I go back in and they're still in there chatting. There's nothing that makes my librarian heart sing like seeing people interact after a program. All of our events are open to the public. They're free of charge, and I try and alternate between those hands-on workshops and then academic-style lectures and concerts. I said step 3 on this slide was to start small and to politely force people to come. It's one of my, I think, greatest strengths in this role at Darien Library is really forcing people to actually come to the events you put on. I mentioned the Senior Advisory Board, and although they're great for advising, because they have this stake in all these events, they're also going to come to every single one. So there's about 7 of us on the board. So if I plan an event, I'm worried about attendance, I know there's going to be at least 7 people there because they care. In addition to that, when you have those 7 people who really, really care and love your events, chances are they're going to invite 1 friend or 2 friends or tell someone else about it. And what's happened is Senior Moments has become this thing where people look forward to, where they're not asking me what's happening next month, they're asking me what's happening in November, in December. They ask me what's happening in June because they want to plan their vacations around it. It's so funny that this little series has kind of become this thing that people look forward to. Okay, so we built an audience, and now we want to grow. I said that step 4 is to advocate for your programs and to get money. When we first started Senior Advisory Board, I had a very, very small budget for programs. And this was fine. We had our first series where people were donating their time, or our cafe at the library was donating the coffee. We had an origami workshop where all the paper was donated by the teacher, which is great, but that's probably not sustainable and won't help us grow like we wanted to. So with the Senior Advisory Board, we applied for an IMLS grant for programs for older adults. It was great to have them on board. I mentioned, I think it was step 2, having the community do the real work for you, and our board did the real work for this grant application. For any of you that have applied for a grant, you know how painstaking that can be. Always very rewarding, but it takes me back to graduate school. It feels like homework. So we applied for the grant, we got it, and the grant really allowed us to have these extra funds that simply would not have been available if we didn't have that grant. It allowed us for a little bit of flexibility in our programming schedule. It allowed us to really go for high-end lecturers, performers. We've gotten some top-notch speakers as well as performers who we really couldn't have afforded if we didn't have this grant. Step 5, conquer the world. I love this picture right here. It's a little pixelated, so I'm sorry about that. But this is members of our Senior Advisory Board. One of the first things they mentioned when we started meeting was, why is there not a community bulletin board in the library? And I didn't have a great answer for them. So we met, and I took that to my director, Alan, and he gave me some answer of, oh, you know, a wall space and putting things up and it getting too messy and blah, 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 blah. So I brought that answer back to the Senior Advisory Board, and of course it was not good enough. So what did they do? They wrote a proposal. They wrote a proposal to Alan, the director of the library, why they wanted a community bulletin board, the guidelines for the bulletin board, as well as how and who would manage the space. Alan received the proposal, and he bought a bulletin board for the Senior Advisory Board and the community to use. Step 5 is conquer the world, and this is them doing that. There was nothing as rewarding as listening to your patrons and then having them articulate what they want and why they want it, and then bringing that to them. It's one of my really favorite days in my job, and it's just such a silly thing, right? It's a cork board, but nothing better than that. Okay, so next we're going to talk about marketing and outreach. You've developed a series of programs, you've planned them, now we need people to fill those seats. Okay, so the best piece of advice I can tell you is to get involved. I mentioned earlier in the presentation potential stakeholders in your town, so the YMCA, the Human Services Department. Meet with those people. I can't say that enough, and listen to them. Listen to the services they offer, listen to what they wish they offer, and then share your story and your experiences. Our Human Services Planning Council, so this is, I'm going to get that name right, the Human Services Planning Council meets once a month in the town of Darien, and every month they talk about a different community issue. So in November, it's often domestic violence. This past month, we talked about heroin usage in town. We've talked about food shortages during the holidays, and then once a year we also talk about services for seniors. The people around that table include our town's first selectmen, they include directors of different nonprofits in town, and myself as well. And having a seat at that table, listening to what the problems are, and then actually making those problems actionable. So what can we do to address these issues? There's nothing more powerful than that. I also mentioned not to replicate. So this is when it comes, it's really important to meet with if there's a director of your senior center, see what they're offering, see what they wish they offered, see if you can co-sponsor events, and then fill those holes together. Everyone is on the same team. We're all hoping to make our town the best place to live in the country. So it really behooves us to work together and develop a series of programs that work for our community. Okay, so this is a picture of the board of At Home in Darien. You'll see me in the second row with the brown hair. Early on in the grant period, I joined the board of trustees for At Home in Darien. They are a local nonprofit. I mentioned them briefly earlier, and a lot of what we do is rides to medical appointments. We also have, if anyone's familiar with Angie's List, we have a vetted services list. So if you're looking for a plumber or if you're looking for a contractor, we have a list of people that we know are awesome, that they charge fairly, and that they work well with seniors. So I joined the board. If you look in the picture, I look a little different than most of the people on the board. I'm a lot younger than everyone. It has become this running joke at our monthly meetings, ha ha ha, Mallory the youngster. But I think it's been really, really impactful for me to, again, have a seat at the table and know that it's not just seniors who care about seniors. I'm in it to win it for the town of Darien as well as for the library. So if I can represent our institution in any manner, I'm going to do it. So they invited me to join, and I said, hell yes. With At Home in Darien, we've worked with local policymakers and social service organizations. It's been fascinating to see how these external stakeholders, so no one in the library, view our program, Senior Moments. During a meeting this spring, a board member mentioned that At Home in Darien is not charged with creating events because that need has been met by the library. They saw that we were having a conversation about, oh, should we have a lecture? Should we have a performance? And it wasn't myself, I promise, but someone else said, why are we going to replicate a service that already exists? In addition, earlier this year, we sent a town-wide survey to every household with someone over the ages of 65 or above. The survey asked a variety of questions about living in town and about aging, and asked which local organization they used. An overwhelming majority, so that was 77%, answered the library. So again, we asked which local organization you use, and 77% answered the library. Next up at 61% was a place of worship. So it's been really interesting to have a commitment outside of the library that really does influence my day-to-day job as well. Okay, so this is our marketing attack. This is what I do for every Senior Moments program. I'm sure there will be a lot of questions of this, so fill up the chat box and I'll answer them at the end. We start our marketing usually about 5 weeks in advance to the event, so that is when the web post on our website goes live. After that, we kind of run through these couple different things in a variety of ways. So the first is we do an e-blast. So we use MailChimp, and our email list consists of about 11,000 people. That's 11,000 people who have signed up for our email blast. In a town of 20,000, that's pretty great. Again, I've only been at the library for 2 years, so I can't say that number is solely responsible for my witty and beautiful e-blast, but I'd like to think it has something to do with it. So usually about a week before the event, we send an e-blast, so that is a dedicated email about the upcoming event. In addition to that, we also include all of our Senior Moments events in a weekly events email. So every Friday afternoon, if you sign up for the Darien Library emails, you'll get an email from me in your inbox with the upcoming events in there. So that includes adults, children, teens, everything that's going on at the library. In addition to our e-blasts, we also do press releases to the local papers. This is something that I honestly don't do for a lot of our big events, simply because press releases take a lot of time and you have to work so far in advance with the printing schedule of the local papers. I do this with our Senior Moments events because in my experience, in an older population, they still get that local paper, they still read it, and they're interested to see what's going on. I have these hopes, that someone will get their copy of Darien Times or Darien News. Maybe they haven't been to the library in a little while. They'll see something that piques their interest and then come. So in addition to those press releases, we also cross-promote with local organizations. So the Senior Center always knows our upcoming events. I also have meetings usually about every other month with all of the nursing homes in town, so they know what's coming up. And then At Home in Darien does a monthly e-blast, and they include all of the Darien Library events as well. In addition to these, I also introduce next month's program during the current month's event. So this month, for example, we're doing a coloring program, and during my introduction of that event, I will introduce the following month's event. So this kind of gives a little bit of, if you come, you know what's coming up, you get excited about what's coming up, and you'll see patrons kind of bring out their smartphone or their little notepad and write the date and time so they know to block off that time to come for next month's event. One thing we do that I think is probably a little unique for libraries, so leave in the chat, let me know if you do this or you don't or what, but we do not use any paper flyers at the library, so this is kind of library-wide, and we've tried them for certain things, but in my experience, it ends up being a waste of time to create this beautiful thing in Illustrator or in Publisher, and it ends up just going in the landfill or the recycling dump. So we don't do paper flyers. I haven't had complaints about it. It seems to be fine. I think it might be community specific since a lot of our residents have smartphones, they have tablets, they're really, really well connected and open with technology. The last thing I want to say is build it and they will come. You start your first couple of programs, maybe you'll have a handful of people here, a handful of people there. It will only grow. If the quality is there, if you get people excited, they're going to invite a friend. They're going to tell their neighbor about it. They're going to come. They're going to meet someone. That audience is only going to grow. Okay, so next, proving your worth. This is every librarian's favorite topic. It's assessment. So you've done your program, you've marketed it, you've had people come, and now it's time to assess and make a case for both your time and your money. Okay. At Darien, I'm always looking to measure impact instead of just empty head counts. If anyone here has a great idea on how to measure impact instead of just numbers, please, please, please leave it in the chat, because I look forward to stealing that great idea and bringing it to Darien. Senior Moments, as well as this grant, really allowed us to focus on we had to, with the grant, focus on something besides head counts. So if you've done a grant, you know that they're often looking for outcomes and indicators and how you're measuring success. And I think after this series, we finally found a good measure. Okay, so this is the result. Our grant ended June of this year, so I had to write my final evaluation as well as go over all of our surveys this summer. It was really, really eye-opening. At the beginning of every Senior Moments program, I have my little introduction where I thank everyone for coming, I thank the IMLS for the wonderful grants, and I thank the performer or lecturer for being there. And I also mentioned that on their way out, they could fill out a survey. It would help us really plan for upcoming events and know if we're doing a good job. The surveys were very, very simple. 3 questions, and they were about a half sheet of paper. They asked if you had ever been to a library program before. They asked if they were true or false questions, so whether you mastered a skill, whether you gained new knowledge, and whether you felt connected to the community during the program. So altogether, we had about 377 patrons join us for a Senior Moment program sometime during the 2014-2015 year. It's not a huge number, right? It's pretty small for a year's worth of programs. Just that number alone really would not tell the full story. So here's what the surveys told us. We had 93 people complete surveys, and of those, 66% of participants reported having mastered a skill during a program. The number may seem a little low, but I mentioned earlier that we alternated hands-on workshops as well as academic-style lectures. So during a lecture on World War II, someone is not going to master a new skill like they would during origami. Same thing as if someone's watching a concert, they're not going to master a new skill as they would if it was a piano class or something like that. So that was a 66%. Now, the most exciting part of the survey, so excuse me while I jump up and down and scream because I'm still very, very excited about this, is that 100%, that's right, 100%, every single person who filled out a survey reported having gained new knowledge during a program. This is like, I want to tattoo this on my forehead. I've never felt like my time and money was more worth it. The results of this survey, I'll talk about that in a bit, but it really helped us advocate for continuing these programs. And that number alone, I think, is huge, 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 huge. So after that, 82% of participants reported feeling connected to the community during a program. Again, a huge, huge, huge number. I just met with our senior advisory board last week for the first time since summer vacation, like I called it, and talking with them about these results, it was great. I mean, they saw this series that they put together, and yes, we went and we listened to everyone say, oh, thank you for this program, it was great, but having that data to support it, I mean, there's nothing better than that. So. All right, and the last thing we tracked was Senior Moments. They attracted 23 new participants who had never attended a library program before. I'm pretty proud of that. I think that's a great thing that we're attracting not just a regular audience, but also new people as well. Okay, so what happens next, right? We had our assessment, we evaluated the programs, and what's next for Senior Moments at Darien Library? So I jokingly put that we have no more money. That is true, and that we do not have the grant anymore. It ended June 30th, so that money is gone. We miss it ever so much. But what I did was I took those survey results and brought them to our director as well as our board of trustees. And what they've done for us is they've created a line in our library's budget for Senior Moments programming. So we don't have as much as the grant allowed us, but the program will be sustained, and I think it's because of the hard work of the Senior Advisory Board as well as the surveys that we collected, and we were huge in advocating for that. So I'm super thrilled to announce that we're carrying forward. Lessons learned, I have never, this is to a fault, so please don't judge me for this, but I've never been a huge fan of the budget process. Perhaps I should be and I really need to be, but math is never my strong suit, and it's numbers and Excel, oh, who has time for that? That being said, the budget process has been a really great planning tool. So not only did we have to do this for the grant, we had to say where the money was going, how it's going to be used and all that, but I've started using that in the rest of my programming schedules. So that means every year, twice a year, I write this giant budget, and I try and be as close as I can about where the money is going to go, how it's going to be used. It's allowed me time to really think about how to best use the grant money and then how we can best use our money on a day-to-day basis at the library. It's becoming a priority for me, so I'm excited for the opportunities, a little scared, but we'll see what happens. Now, upcoming events. We have this Thursday, we are having a coloring for adults. So I'm sure you're familiar with those adult coloring books that are all the rage, very trendy right now. We have an event this Thursday, so we have a couple really great adult coloring books as well as some free printout pages. We're just going to be a drop-in program. We're providing the coffee and the snacks per usual, and it'll be fun to see who comes. In October this year, we have a concert / lecture, and it's on popular music of the 1950s and 60s. So it's a professor who also is a performer, so he's going to do a song and then talk about it, and then do a song, talk about it. We've done this format a couple other times, and it's always hugely popular. I think if you want to know what does the best at Darien Library in terms of attendance, I think those lectures / concerts absolutely do the best. So then that's in October. In November, we have, I don't want to say it's what I'm most excited about for the fall, but one of the programs I'm most excited about. It's one of those programs that my Senior Advisor Board named, because I'm terrible at naming things. They're calling it Animal House. And what is Animal House, may you ask? Well, we are having a petting zoo for older adults, which is pretty great. And this event came about because, again, our Senior Advisory Board, they have all the great ideas. Last summer, the Children's Library had several programs with animals. So they had one where a llama came, they had one where bugs came, there's always animals going on in a children's library. You know, you can read to Rover if your library does that, you're familiar. And our seniors, we want something for us. We want to, pet a snake. We want to see a turtle or whatever it is. So we're working with a local farm, and they're bringing in some animals. The one I'm most excited about is they're bringing in a small kangaroo. So that's going to be great. It'll be November. It'll be fun to see who comes and what happens. But if we can encourage our seniors to get in touch with their younger selves, I think that's beautiful. So, all right. So now the best part of any professional learning opportunity, the things to steal. If you're anything like me, you're shameless in your thievery, and I hope you are. We're librarians, and our industry is based on sharing, so please feel free, steal them and then tweet at me and send me pictures of how great they go. I would love that. Okay, so this is a couple lectures and discussions we've held at the library. The first I wanted to mention was local history. We've done a couple things with that. They're always hugely popular. I don't know if it's just Darien or if you can speak to your community as well, but anything that talks about whether it's the history of this old bridge, the history of this cemetery, or just fun stories, always well done. We had a lecturer last fall who titled his lecture, I love this title, so I included it, two shots heard around the world, and it was the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. Another program that brought in a huge audience and a new audience, so a lot of people we hadn't seen. I saw the success of that program and have adjusted the rest of my year because historical lectures do well, academic lectures do well, and when you target seniors, when you encourage them to learn and be curious, I think that's wonderful. So that was a lecture we did last fall. Last winter we had a great program. I actually partnered with our children's library on this. We called it Gabbin' with Grandkids. And the program was two parts. The first was we did a little tech tutorial on FaceTime and Skype and Google Hangout. So we showcased those three ways to kind of stay connected. And then the children's library taught grandparents how to conduct story time for their long-distance grandparents. So ultimately what we were hoping is that they would take out their iPhones, they would send a little FaceTime call to their grandchildren and then share a story with them. In addition to the event, we also, because of the grant money, we purchased a couple picture books that are meant for grandparents to check out. So it's a separate collection. It's only for grandparents, and it's to encourage them to read to their grandchildren. So in addition to that technology class, I also led a class last June that was an introduction to online dating, one of the best classes I think I've ever led at the library. It brought in about 40 people, so a pretty big event. And we talked about different online dating sites. We talked about how to craft a nice profile, how to send a great first message, and then online and offline safety. What I've heard as a result from that program, I actually had a one-on-one appointment, so kind of a follow-up for this class, was that it's really, really important for seniors not just to date and to stay engaged, but also to do so safely. Dating has changed in the last 10 years, it's changed, let alone the last 50 years. So we can make sure that our patrons are being safe. I think there's nothing better. This August, we also had History of Hip Hop, which was pretty fabulous. We had a dancer come and perform, but also he shared kind of how hip hop started in the 1970s in the Bronx, and how dance and b-boy culture is part of it, how graffiti is part of it, how rapping and MC is part of it. I had a patron say to me at the end that she came because she knew nothing about hip hop and just wanted to learn, which I thought was great. We've also done some current events lectures, so we did one on Charlie Hebdo last year when that happened, and then we've had a class on 3D printing as well. Okay, so we've also done some low-tech making classes. Last December it was actually a board member who volunteered her time. She's an origami enthusiast, so she taught patrons how to make origami ornaments for their trees or mantles or whatever they want to do for the holiday season. We also had a painting party. This was really, really fun. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Painting with a Twist, or kind of these companies where you go to their studio and they teach everyone as a group how to paint the same painting, and you can do so in about an hour and a half to 2 hours. So they did an off-site event for us where they actually came into the library and they taught people how to make this Monet-inspired piece of art, which was lots of fun. We also, last winter, we did arm knitting. I am terrible at crafts. I will tell you that now. I can't use Pinterest. It stresses me out because I can't do any of that stuff. But one of our librarians is big into arm knitting, so she led a class for us. All right, so we've also done music performances. I've mentioned that these are really, really popular at the library. They always bring in a good audience, and we try and pair these performances with also a part lecturer. The people you'll see kind of here, I think, love songs, and then 1950s, 60s, and hula zen. Those performers are also professors that I found at universities. So who knew there was these academic people who also had this great talent for singing or performing. So it's been fun. All right, and lastly, I want to say to use your community resources. Some of our best events have been when I partnered with another organization or we've kind of combined forces to put on something fabulous. The picture on the right here is from an event we did with the Historical Society, and it was a walking historical tour of town. So I mentioned earlier that local history is always huge. I met with the Historical Society volunteers. We mapped it out. We looked at books, and the Historical Society volunteers actually led 2 different groups on it looks sunny right there, but it started out very rainy, through a tour of town, which was fabulous. We've also partnered with the YMCA to do exercise classes. Last year we had Qigong, which is a type of, if you're familiar with Tai Chi and meditation, done that. We've also partnered with the high school for plays and football games. So part of my role at Home in Darien is they have these big vans and they can transport people. So what we've done the last couple years is basically sent seniors to these plays or football games that the high school is putting on. The high school will designate these kind of special days for us to do those things, so they're acknowledged over the intercom, and it's really, really lovely to see them really engaged with the youth in town. We also work with Parks and Rec all the time. We do every couple months what I call a walking book group. So it's your typical book group, except we're walking through a park or through the Darien Nature Center, always fun. And the last thing is, what are your colleagues' expertise? I mentioned that one of my colleagues loves arm knitting. She led a class for us. I mentioned our children's library teaching about story time. They've done that for me. I think it's perfectly okay to exploit your colleagues and get them to share their talents. Alrighty, so that is my final slide. I had to chuck it through the last couple minutes. I have on this page links to a couple resources through the CDC as well as the Census Bureau if you're interested in more statistics about aging in America. So without that, I would love to open it up for questions, hear what you have to say, and thank you for your time. This has been really fun.
All right. Thank you so much, Mallory, for all of the awesome ideas. I did get a few ideas in the chat box submitted to me about what other libraries are doing with seniors, and I submitted those. So take a look at those. We did have quite a few questions come in, so I'm going to get right to those. Megan asks about the coloring events. Now, I've seen some of my adult friends do like wine and coloring events, and I thought that looks really cool. That looks really therapeutic. So can you talk a little bit more about the coloring events that you do?
Sure. So we're actually doing our first one this Thursday, so I haven't done it yet. And we have a second one that we're doing in October, so I can talk about those yet. They haven't happened again, but this is how I'm kind of structuring them. So the first one on Thursday is for Senior Moments. We are providing coffee and treats like we do for all of our Senior Moments programs, and it's very, very casual. I'm just kind of spreading out coloring books as well as sheets that I've printed. I've purchased coloring pencils, gel pens, sharpeners, and I made sure for the program for seniors to print out some designs that were not as, not as like tiny. If you've seen like Secret Garden, it's very, very small lines and all that. So seniors, of course, often have problems with eye deterioration, so we have some bigger ones for that. And it's casual. It's drop in color, see what's going to happen. The event in October, we're actually doing it as I do a separate series that targets 20 and 30-something-year-olds, and we're doing that at a bar. So there's going to be wine, beer, and just color and talk.
Great. Thank you. I had a couple questions come in about the age thing with your programs. I'm going to kind of lump them together.
Sure.
One person asked, what do you do like if you get 20-somethings at your program? Does it detract from the senior focus, or do you do things in a way that enhances the patron mix? And then another question came in Of course, the programs are open to the public, but how do you keep a program from being taken over by kids and their families, like the petting zoo? Another person asked, do you specify an age for senior, especially for programs just like the petting zoo, or leave it loose? So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, great questions, everyone. Thank you. So we do not specify an age to come to senior moments. Of course, like any library program, it's open to everyone and all that. We have had a few times when younger people want to come to programs, and we welcome them with open arms. I think the crowd of seniors welcomes them with open arms. We have not had children interested in coming to the programs. That being said, I'm expecting the petting zoo will attract some children. I'm hoping that calling it Animal House will kind of deter from that, because that's kind of something you have to have the reference for. That is the first program that we are going to limit by age. So unless, I would say, if you're 20 plus, you can come to senior moments, but we will not be having children at the petting zoo. And that's strictly because we wanted to keep it special for the seniors, because they wanted a program for them.
Great, thank you. Jill asks, in cross-promotion with the local organizations that you work with, what exactly do you send them? Do you send them graphics, press releases, those types of things?
Sure. So it really depends on the organization. There's a couple organizations that really just do this kind of community email newsletter, and all I do for those is title, date, time, and a sentence or two about the event. So very, very simple. It's just copying and pasting from what I've already created. When I go to nursing homes, what I typically do is I'll print out from our website the events, just so their outreach coordinators know what we're doing, and then they include that information in all their newsletters as well.
Great. Have you done any programs to learn more about sports interests, such as soccer, lacrosse, of grandkids as a pathway for engaging in conversation with tweens and teens and their grandparents?
Oh my gosh, I love that idea. So no, we haven't. We do, I mentioned earlier, we partner with the high school, so we kind of take, usually once a season, we take a bus of seniors to a high school game, and it's kind of like senior day, or I don't remember what they call it, and that is always, it sells out. I mean, sells out, it's free, but I mean, we always reach registration, it always fills up, and that's been really, really great. So nothing about kind of teaching sports, but I love that idea, and that is one I'm going to steal, so thank you.
I love it too. Claire actually mentioned they're doing their first coloring program tonight at their library, so that's great.
Cool.
Yeah, good luck with that. Another question is, what is the average cost of your programs, or the average range that you spend on a program?
Yeah, great question. So it really depends. I would say probably about half of our programs are free. So that means that the presenter has donated their time. That means that our cafe at the library has donated their coffee and treats. That means that a local organization has donated A, B, C, and D. The good thing about having these programs for seniors is once you've done a couple, it makes it really, really easy to write that email to a local professor or wherever and just say, hey, we have this series of programs dedicated to seniors. We've done A, B, C, and D. This many people have come. You know, everyone wants to help. That's just a feel-good story. People want to contribute. So that being said, we have, of course, spent money on programs. We had a grant after all. The most we have spent on an event has been $450. So that was for what was it called? The Grand Old Music of the Grand Old Opry. So that was a big band. There was also a big kind of electronic virtual discussion about music of the Grand Old Opry, so there's kind of a lot involved. Anything that's music, we're spending money on typically.
Okay. Do you find that there are more successful times of days for events, and then what about the time? Is morning better than afternoon versus early evening?
Yeah, great question. So we've done some experimenting with time, and Typically, what we do is our Senior Moments programs happen at 3 p.m. In my experience, that is the best time. I don't know if that's community specific or what, but 3 p.m. tends to work. It's kind of the middle of the day. We can do programs in the dead of winter, and it's not dark yet. That has worked. We've also done programs at 1, at 11 in the morning, and then some of our big programs we do at 7 p.m. at night. But programs for seniors, 3 p.m., that has worked the best with us.
I'm wondering, especially, like, I don't know about what kind of winters you get in Connecticut, but I'm wondering if in Wisconsin, if earlier is better, especially in the wintertime.
Sure.
If people don't like driving. I've heard even from my mother, have an event early so the older people don't have to drive in the dark. So I wonder if that could play a factor too, especially in Wisconsin with our winters and driving at night. So that might be something.
Yeah. People, especially programs with seniors, like you have to take into account the weather because if you're covered in snow, they're not going to come. It makes it really easy to reschedule a program then because you just know your attendance numbers are going to be nil.
Right. I'm not even a senior, and I don't like driving in snow. I will not. We had a comment come through about. She said our patrons want paper flyers, and that might be the case in some libraries. But how did your group make that adjustment, or how has that been with not doing paper flyers?
Sure. These are all great questions, so thank you. I can tell you that we have been a paperless library, a paper flyer list library, for more years than I have been at the library. So we opened a new building about 6 years ago. And when we opened the new building, part of that, we're a LEED Gold certified building, and part of that environmental consciousness goes into paper flyers, right? If you're printing out 100 of them, and then next month you print out another 100 of them, you know how taxing that can be on the environment. So I think 6 years ago, it probably was a headache for our community. I can tell you since I've been at the library it's been about 2 years now, I very, very rarely have someone ask for a takeaway. And if they do, I just kind of print out the event from our website. So I just go to the event posting, has the picture, it has all the details, and print it right from there.
That might be worthy of another webinar, Mallory. That's very, very interesting. I like that. The final question I have, and this is more for me, but I'm guessing a lot of people in our audience were thinking this. So, you mentioned, there's yourself, the head of adult programming at your library. Mm-hmm. You have 2 other full-time people, and then you have 2 part-timers. And I'm sure a lot of people in our audience, especially at our very small and rural Wisconsin libraries, were like, well, gosh, I do adult programming, and that's just part of my job, or we don't have a staff. Yep. So and I'm sure you've come across that. So what advice do you have, for those smaller libraries who don't have the staff, the resources or the time, or maybe it's just 25% of somebody's job? How do you do a good job of doing all of this for the senior audience?
Yeah, I think at Darien Library, we are really lucky. I mean, I have a full department. I know that's not the case for a lot of libraries. I can tell you that one of our full-time employees was just made full-time this July, and that was after a lot of advocating for additional support. So again, I've been here for 2 years, and after 2 years, I got a whole her and I got another part-time employee this July 1st. So the department just expanded, and that is after years of kind of plugging away, long days, reaching out to everyone I can in the community. So that being said, you're starting from zero, or you have all these other things to do. And I mean, if anyone here today has plenty of extra time to devote to library things, please let me know and let me take your job, because I just don't think that exists. I mean, the best piece of advice I can give to you is just to make it a priority. We're all here, we're all librarians because we care, right? Because we want to make a difference in our communities. And I think programs for seniors should be a priority for all of us. And if that means going to a couple extra meetings after work, if that means to designating a time for yourself once a week, an hour a week to plan, the next event or to market the next event or whatever that is, I think it's time well spent.
Great. Thank you so much, Mallory. And thank you, all of you, for your fabulous questions. I do want to quickly mention that our next webinar is coming up on Wednesday, October 7th, not Tuesday. The intro said Tuesday. That was a mistake by me. Wednesday, October 7th, on digital habits of public library members, and that'll be at 1 p.m. That program is open. You can register for that at any time. So thank you again, Mallory. Mallory's slides and a recording of this will be posted up on our website sometime later today. Thank you again, Mallory. Thank you all to you for listening and for your great questions and participation. I hope you all have a great rest of your day and a great week. So long.
Bye, guys. Thank you.